So this is topic 8 for C3702 Introduction to Environmental Engineering, and topic 8 is hazardous waste management. So the overview for that, the learning objectives or competencies for this module align with some of the course learning outcome of the main course. Mainly course learning outcome number 6. And this is part 2 because the solid waste covered the part 1. So that's why define, classify, characterize the hazardous waste and discuss the hazardous waste management technologies. So here is the outline. We'll define the hazardous waste from technical and regulatory points of view. Then we'll discuss the RCRA, Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, and then the CERCLA and SARA. I will explain all of those: hazardous waste identification and exclusions, types of hazardous waste, we'll discuss that, hazardous waste recycling and universal waste, and hazardous waste generators and transporters. Then hazardous waste treatment, storage and disposal facilities, we'll discuss about that too. Land disposal restriction, what kind of restriction we have to dispose those hazardous waste in the land or landfill. Permitting for TSDFS, treatment, storage, disposal facilities. So the learning outcomes, here are the learning outcomes for the student. So it will be define, characterize, and identify hazardous waste. Then differentiate between RCRA and CERCLA. Classify the hazardous waste types, generators, and transporters. Define and identify universal waste. Interpret the regulatory requirements for hazardous waste and universal waste management. So here are the definitions, technical definitions of hazardous waste: waste that pose a substantial danger immediately or over a period of time to human, plant, and animal life are classified as hazardous waste. So the regulatory definition is a little bit longer. Hazardous waste means a solid waste or combination of solid waste, which because of its quantity, concentration, or physical, chemical, or infectious characteristics may cause or significantly contribute to an increase in the mortality or an increase in serious, irreversible, or incapacitating illness. Or it could be pose a substantial present or potential hazard to human health or the environment when improperly treated, stored, transported, disposed of, or otherwise managed. So there's the two definition. Looks like the regulatory definition is a little bit longer because of the way the regulations are structured. So introduction to RCRA. Basically, RCRA stands for Resource Conservation and Recovery Act. There are four broad goals of the set by RCRA. Number one is to protect the human health and the environment from the hazard posed by waste disposal, and to conserve energy and natural resources through waste recycling and recovery, to reduce or eliminate as expeditiously as possible the amount of waste generated, including hazardous waste, and to ensure that waste are managed in a manner that is protective to human health and the environment. So here are the RCRA. To achieve the above goals, RCRA developed three interrelated programs. So one is Subtitle C that deals with the hazardous waste program. Subtitle D is a solid waste program. The Subtitle C is the hazardous waste, that's the topic that we are doing. Subtitle D we already did in topic 7, right? Topic 7 was the solid waste. And Subtitle I is the underground storage tank. So these are the three interrelated programs that RCRA developed. So the Waste Management Act and provision. The Act is defined as the law that describes the kind of waste management program that Congress wants to establish. The Act also provides the administrator of EPA or his or her designee with the authority to implement the Act, ultimately to create the regulations out of it. Currently, the Act consists of 10 subtitles and provisions. So here are the 10 subtitles. A is for general, B office solid waste, C is a hazardous waste, D is state or regional solid waste plans, E is duties of the Secretary of Commerce and Resource Recovery, and F is federal responsibilities, G is miscellaneous, H is RDD and information, I is underground storage tank, and J is standards for the tracking and management of medical waste. So the Act, that is actually a combination of the first federal solid waste statutes and all subsequent amendments. So here are some of those things we can say. Solid Waste Disposal Act of 1965 is the first one came in. Then RCRA came in 1976. Then Hazardous and Solid Waste Amendments in 1984. Federal Facilities Compliance Act of 1992, then Land Disposal Program Flexibility Act of 1996. So before 92, looks like any facilities owned by the federal government may not need to abide by the state government rules and regulations. But after 1992 Act, definitely they have to do that. So here is the further definition of the Act, law that describes the kind of waste management program that Congress wants to establish, and the regulations, legal mechanisms that establish standards or impose requirements as mandated by the Act. It also translates the general mandate of a statute into a set of requirements for the agency and the regulatory community. So as I said, like say Act could be 2 pages, the regulations to meet the requirements of the Act could be 500 to 1,000 pages, right, depending on how we are explaining. Guidance. Guidance means how to. It provides the direction for implementing and complying with regulations and policies should do. Statement that outline a position or on a topic or give instructions of how a procedure should be conducted. So if somebody violates the policy, they may not need to take into the code, but the guidance can be implemented. Guidance can be like litigated or things like that. So RCRA and its interrelationship to other environmental statutes. RCRA is one of the several regulatory programs in place to protect the environment. The RCRA regulates work closely with other environmental statutes such as Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, Emergency Planning and Community Right to Know Act (EPCRA), the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide and Rodenticide Act (FIFRA), and the Marine Protection Research and Sanctuary Act (MPRSA). So the regulations were a few more. The OSHA, OSHA is the other one. Safe Drinking Water Act (SDWA), and the last one is Toxic Substance Control Act. So these are kind of like RCRA regulated environmental programs or environmental acts. So federal regulation under RCRA. So it's Title 42, Public Health and the Welfare, Chapter 103, Comprehensive Environmental Response and Compensation Liability Act. So Subchapter 1, Hazardous Substance Release Liability Compensations. Subchapter 2, Hazardous Substance Response Revenue. Chapter 3 is Miscellaneous Provisions, and Subchapter 4 is Pollution Insurance. So CERCLA and SARA. CERCLA basically stands for Comprehensive Environmental Response Compensation and Liability Act. CERCLA is also known as Superfund in brief. SARA is a Superfund Amendments and Reauthorization Act that came later on CERCLA. So relationship of RCRA and CERCLA. CERCLA is closely tied to RCRA. Both are designed to protect human health and the environment from the danger of hazardous waste. While these programs are similar, they do have different regulatory focuses. So, for example, the RCRA regulates how waste should be managed to avoid potential threats to human and the environment. And CERCLA focuses on actual releases or substantial threats of a release in environment of a hazardous substance, pollutant, or contaminant that present an imminent or substantial threat to human health. So in this case, we can say that RICRA is a vaccine, right, or something like that. If we take a vaccine, then we don't get it. And but if we already have something, then what do we do? Like so for the flu, what we take kind of um, like say antibiotic, right? So CERCLA works as a after the map, means already pollution is done. Then how to take care of the pollution and other things like that. And RICRA prohibits to make the pollution, things like that. So CERCLA provides for both response and enforcement mechanism. The four major provisions of the law establish a fund, super fund, to pay um, for investigations and remedies at sites where the responsible people cannot be found or will voluntarily pay. A priority list of abandoned or inactive hazardous waste site for cleanup, we call it NPL, National Priority List. The mechanism for action at abandoned or inactive sites, the National Contingency Plan. And the last one is liability for those responsible for cleanup. So National Priority List (NPL) serves as a tool for EPA to use in identifying sites that appear to present a significant risk to public health, or the money or the environment, and may merit use of Superfund money. It is first established 1982. There is a matrix called HRS was developed and used to HRS score the contaminated sites to go to the NPL with the highest score. Sites on the NPL are eligible for Superfund money for cleanup. So usually Congress does that. So Congress implemented, but always it's prioritized by the number of ranking of the sites. So here is hazardous ranking system. It's a metric system that is used for ranking the uncontrolled hazardous waste site in terms of the potential threat based on contaminant of the containment of the hazardous substances, route of release, and characteristics of amount of substances, and likely targets. So HRS score is based on the probability of contamination from four pathways. Number one is groundwater, number two is surface water, number three is soil, number four is the air. So these are the pathways that's considered to rank a hazardous waste site. The groundwater and air migration pathways are evaluated for ingestion and inhalation respectively. The surface water migration and the soil exposure pathways are evaluated for multiple intake routes. The surface water is evaluated for drinking water, human food chain, and environmental contact or exposure. Whereas the soil is evaluated for potential exposure to resident population and the nearby population. So the National Contingency Plan is the EPA's blueprint for implementing Superfund. In 1982, NCP issued in response to 1980 CERCLA, provided a framework for the remedial investigation of feasibility study process. A specific criteria determining priorities among sites through HRS. In 1990, NCP issued in response to the 86 SARA established risk level for the evaluation of whether sites require remediation. Carcinogenic risk in the range of 10 to the minus 6 to 10 to the minus 4 and non-carcinogenic hazard index of 1. So if we have this within this range or the index is 1, then they have to evaluate for those. So modified the feasibility study process to provide for a preference in selection of permanent remedies involving treatment to reduce the volume, toxicity or mobility of human hazardous substance, and established the Superfund Innovative Technology Evaluation SITE program in this case. So then the liability, the Superfund process includes liability provisions that are intended to replenish the fund and replace the burden of cleaning of sites and other things like that. Congress mandated that the EPA should recover cost for site cleanup and potential responsible parties PRP. The PRP include the present and past owners of the property in question, owners of the facility at the time of disposal, generators, whoever generated the waste and disposed it in there, transporter who conveyed any or transported any hazardous substance to the site. So these are the ones. So we are going to stop here in this case, and we'll start again from the next slide, slide number 28.